The mission was supposed to be clean, efficient, textbook execution, but Avery Graves knew better than to trust things to go smoothly. She slipped through the shadows, weaving her way inside the Tokyo estate of a Japanese mafia boss. The man who had stolen classified state documents and sold his soul to the highest bidder. The bastard wasn't just peddling secrets. He was shipping weapons to terrorists, using his business facade as a cover. One by one, his guards went down, their demise swift and silent. By the time she reached the main office, it was just her and the boss, and Avery had zero patience for games. With her gun steady, she demanded the flash drive, giving him just one chance to cooperate. Then came the interruption. One of his lackeys, fueled by desperation, charged at her, forcing her into a fight. Avery didn't do mercy, and she didn't waste time. She neutralized the man, barely breaking a sweat, and bolted after the boss, who had taken off upstairs. Up there, more goons awaited, guns drawn, nerves shot to hell. They fired first, big mistake. Avery tore through them, fists and bullets working in tandem until she was the only one left standing. No more underlings, no more distractions, just her and the coward trying to cheat death. But he fought back, claws out like a cornered rat, and the brawl that followed was fast, brutal, unforgiving. The man had strength, but Avery had skill, and soon enough, she was the last one breathing. Flash drive secured, mission accomplished. She barely had time to catch her breath before she was on a plane back to America, where her husband David was waiting for her. A rare moment of normalcy. The next day, Avery was back at CIA headquarters, handing over the drive to Jarvis Headland, her boss, who never failed to admire her perfect execution. But there was no time for celebration. A new name had surfaced. Kaylee, a ruthless Russian assassin responsible for the deaths of 2 CIA agents in South Africa. Avery was the obvious choice for the mission, but Jarvis hadn't received official clearance from the CIA director yet, so nothing was certain. Still, Avery knew how these things went. If there was a hunt, she'd be the one leading it. That evening, Avery pulled up to her apartment complex, exchanged brief greetings with her neighbor, and headed inside. The moment her foot crossed the threshold, something was off. Her home was a wreck, David nowhere in sight. Then came the ringing phone, but it wasn't hers. She answered. A calm, detached voice delivered its demand to steal the Canary Black file from a secret CIA facility, or David died. The file was hidden in the fake tooth of Laszlo Stoica, a high-profile CIA detainee, and Avery had 9 hours to get it. There was no room for negotiation. Determined to fight back, she called in a favor, reaching out to her hacker friend, asking for a trace on the call. The location popped up fast. It was an abandoned building on the city's outskirts. Without hesitation, Avery raced to the site, hoping to track down whoever had taken David. But when she arrived, all she found was his ring and a battered old cell phone. It rang. She picked up. The same voice, this time mocking, had expected her to track the call. And then came the real punch. She had stepped on a landmine. The voice laid it out plainly. Escape, complete the job, or die there and take David down with her. Avery had seconds to decide, but hesitation wasn't in her vocabulary. She moved fast, used the environment to free her foot, and the second she stepped off, a grenade was launched. She reacted instinctively, kicking up a table leg, sending the grenade flying out a window before it detonated outside. With no time to regroup, Avery headed straight for the CIA's secret facility, where Laszlo Stoica was being held. At the entrance, she demanded access from Agent Maxfield, but he was hesitant, unwilling to let her near Laszlo without proper clearance. Thinking fast, Avery played her trump card, claiming that Jarvis had sent her to interrogate Laszlo on a mission-critical assignment. Maxfield reluctantly agreed, leading her inside. Avery knew from the second she walked into Laszlo Stoica's interrogation room that this wasn't going to be easy. He sat there with the cool arrogance of a man who had nothing to lose, refusing to entertain the idea that she had been sent for the Canary Black file. But Avery wasn't in the mood for negotiations. She was on borrowed time, and her husband's life hung in the balance. With precision that spoke of years of training, she forced the fake tooth from Laszlo's mouth, expecting to finally lay her hands on the classified file. But the moment she pried it open, her stomach twisted. The file was gone, A whole lot of empty space where the answer to everything should have been. Every instinct screamed at her to move fast, so she did, slipping out of the facility before anyone caught on to what she had done. But she wasn't in the clear. Meanwhile, Agent Maxfield, sharp as ever, noticed Laszlo's missing tooth, and his mind jumped straight to the worst possible conclusion. Avery had stolen the file. Within moments, he was calling the shots, ordering his men to track her down. And just like that, Avery's name lit up the fugitive list. Word spread faster than wildfire, and soon CIA Deputy Director Nathan Evans was breathing fire, furious at the thought of classified state data slipping through their fingers. Jarvis, Avery's boss, nearly choked on his spit when he saw her name flagged as a traitor, and before he could fully process it, his phone buzzed. Evans was demanding an urgent meeting. Inside the CIA headquarters, Evans made his orders crystal clear. Avery had to be captured at all costs. If the Canary Black file fell into enemy hands, it wouldn't just be a PR nightmare, it would be a catastrophe for national security. After the meeting wrapped, Maxfield had another idea. Instead of tracking Avery the hard way, they could use her husband David as bait, drag him into custody, and Avery wouldn't be able to resist coming straight to them. Jarvis knew this was crossing a line, but Evans had made it clear. Failure wasn't an option, so whether he liked it or not, they were moving forward. At the same time, Avery was playing her own game. She went straight to Jarvis's wife, borrowing her phone to call Jarvis without raising suspicions. When Jarvis answered, she could hear it in his voice. He was pretending it was just another casual call from his wife because Maxfield was watching him like a hawk. Avery didn't waste a second. She laid it all out. David was kidnapped. She had been blackmailed into stealing Canary Black. But the file wasn't in Laszlo's tooth, and she had no idea where it had been moved. She begged Jarvis to trust her, to believe she would never betray him, never betray her country. He listened, but the risk was too high. He cut the call short before Maxfield got suspicious. Soon after, Jarvis and Maxfield arrived at Avery's house, turning the place inside out, searching for David. But there was nothing. David was gone, just as Avery had said. Jarvis made a last-ditch effort, reasoning with Maxfield, explaining that David had probably been kidnapped and Avery was being forced to act against her will. But Maxfield wasn't buying it. If Avery was innocent, why hadn't she come to them for help? Jarvis argued back, saying she might have been threatened not to. Probably David's life was on the line. Maxfield wasn't interested in hypotheticals. He wanted Avery caught, no matter what. Meanwhile, Avery had made her way to her old house, hoping to find a safe place to regroup. But before she could settle, an attack came out of nowhere. She fought back with everything she had, managing to defeat her assailant. Then his phone rang. She picked up, and there it was, the kidnapper's voice, cutting through the silence like a knife against stone, asking if she had retrieved the file. Avery didn't hold back, saying the file wasn't there. Laszlo's tooth had been empty, and the kidnapper had fed her bad intel. The response was swift. The kidnapper said that if the file wasn't there, that meant Deputy Director Evans had moved it. The next step was clear. Avery had to find Evans and force him to tell her where the file was. She refused. Breaking into CIA headquarters was a death wish. Suddenly, a video of David, bloodied, beaten, tortured, was sent to her. Avery had no choice but to comply. After the call ended, Avery arranged a secret meeting with Jarvis, hoping he had answers. In the dimly lit parking lot, she spoke fast, swore on everything she had. She hadn't taken the file. She was being set up and she had nowhere else to turn. Jarvis knew her well enough to understand the truth, but his hands were tied. If he helped her, he'd be risking everything. Then Maxfield and his team appeared. They had been watching Jarvis all along. With no time to react, Avery was arrested, thrown into a CIA transport vehicle, her freedom slipping away. But the convoy barely made it 3 blocks before all hell broke loose. Several unknown vehicles appeared, hunting them down in a high-speed pursuit. The chase descended into chaos, tearing through the streets, bullets flying in every direction. It ended in wreckage and all vehicles crashed, leaving behind smoke and debris. The attackers had been sent by the kidnapper, convinced Avery had betrayed him by seeking CIA help. Avery, injured but alive, dragged herself from the wreck, engaging in a gunfight with the remaining pursuers before fleeing into an alley. There she faced another enemy, their fight tight, brutal, and exhausting. When she ripped off his mask, shock hit her like a gut punch. It was her own neighbor. Before she could get any answers, he died, leaving her more confused than ever. Still reeling from the chaos, Avery checked into a hotel, knowing that Evans was staying there too. She had one shot at getting the truth, and she couldn't afford to miss. Avery slipped into Evans' hotel room, moving with the precision of a ghost, ensuring that no sound betrayed her presence. When Evans finally stepped inside, she struck fast, forcing a soundproof mask over his face before tying his hands to the chair, securing him in place. She wasted no time. The file wasn't in Laszlo's tooth, and she needed answers now. Evans, ever the bureaucratic puppet, refused to talk, his silence a shield against the inevitable. But Avery wasn't in the mood for games. She turned up the pressure, forcing him to break under the weight of pain. Unable to endure the torture, Evans finally spilled the truth. The Canary Black file was stored in a computer at CIA headquarters, locked behind a password only he knew. Avery took the password, ensuring he wouldn't interfere, before knocking him unconscious. With the information secured, she contacted her hacker friend, requesting one final favor: a large drone capable of getting her in and out of the CIA facility. She promised any price, knowing this was her last shot. The hacker agreed, and soon they met outside the facility, preparing for the operation. Avery outlined the plan. The hacker would fly her to the rooftop, then return in 10 minutes for extraction. With no time to waste, the hacker launched the drone, and Avery hung beneath it, soaring toward the top floor. Once inside, she moved fast, inserting a drive into the computer, initiating the file transfer. Meanwhile, Evans's aide grew suspicious, unable to reach him. When she checked his room, she found him tied to the chair and immediately freed him. Evans, now furious, ordered his agents to stop Avery, sending every available unit to intercept her. But Avery was already ahead. The file transfer completed, and she escaped just in time, dodging bullets as she latched onto the drone, soaring into the night sky. Once safe, Avery ordered the hacker to open the file, needing to see what she had stolen before handing it over. What she found shook her to the core. Canary Black wasn't a list of classified state secrets. It was a virus, a weapon capable of crashing global computer systems, shutting down the internet, and collapsing stock markets worldwide. With one keystroke, the file could paralyze entire nations, cutting off power grids and communication networks. Avery hesitated. Handing this over meant unleashing chaos. But David's life was on the line. She had no choice. Before leaving, she sent a message to Jarvis, instructing him to track her phone, ensuring he could find her if things went south. Arriving at the meeting location, Avery found nothing, just a ringing phone. She answered. Silence. Then the call cut off. She had run out of time. The realization hit her like a freight train. She had failed, and David was gone. Before she could process the devastation, a shock surged through her body. Someone had tased her from behind. Meanwhile, at CIA headquarters, Evans lashed out, berating Maxfield and Jarvis for failing to capture Avery. He demanded they track her down at all costs, ensuring the file didn't fall into enemy hands. On the other side of the world, the kidnapper made his move. With a mask on, live broadcast initiated, addressing the Global Unification Summit. Avery, now restrained, watched as the kidnapper revealed his plan. He had accessed Canary Black, and now he was demanding a ransom, 1% of each nation's GDP, roughly $1 trillion. To prove his power, he targeted Singapore, cutting off all electricity, plunging the nation into darkness. The heads of state panicked, scrambling to transfer the ransom, desperate to prevent their countries from collapsing. Meanwhile, Jarvis tracked Avery's phone, arriving at the kidnapper's hideout. He eliminated the guards, slipping inside, but was quickly captured, forced before the kidnapper himself. Jarvis's blood ran cold. The kidnapper was Brezhnov, a Croatian cyber terrorist who had been hunting Canary Black for years. Brezhnov revealed his plan. The CIA had created Canary Black, but only through Avery's actions had he finally seized it. Then, with cold precision, he executed Jarvis, ensuring no interference. Avery, still unconscious, was dragged forward, her fate now in Brezhnov's hands. He thanked her. Because of her, he had everything he needed: Avery's patience had already been hanging by a thread, but after everything she had endured, after the betrayals and the fights, she wasn't about to let Brezhnov backpedal on his promise. Her body screamed for a break, bruised and battered, but her mind was locked in. She wanted David back, wanted an end to this nightmare, and she wasn't leaving without answers. Brezhnov, ever the twisted mastermind, wore that smug grin that made Avery's blood boil, and with a lazy flick of his wrist, he gestured for one of his henchmen to drag David into the room. Avery barely held herself together when she saw him, his face swollen, his body wrecked, but still standing. Somehow, through it all, he hadn't cracked. That tiny bit of hope was short-lived. With zero hesitation, Brezhnov raised his gun and fired a round straight into David's stomach, his expression untouched by remorse. No theatrics, no threats, just brutal execution. He gave them 20 minutes, enough time to say their last words before they were both wiped off the map. Then, as if the scene wasn't grim enough, he swaggered out of the room, undoubtedly feeling high and mighty now that several nations had already started pouring money into his ransom demands. Avery barely had time to think, barely had time to process the weight of everything happening before her eyes, when suddenly David moved fast, faster than any man that injured should have been able to. Before their captors had the chance to react, David had torn through them, taking down the guards like they were nothing, like it was routine. Avery just stood there for a second, processing what she had just witnessed. There had been no hesitation, no uncertainty, no struggling against the pain he had just endured. David wasn't just fighting to survive. He was fighting like someone trained for this, someone who had done it before, probably more times than she could count. Her instincts kicked in before her emotions could get the better of her gun snapping up between them as soon as the dust settled. Her finger hovered over the trigger, her heartbeat pounding against her ribs, because suddenly she had no clue who she had been married to. David didn't even flinch. He sighed, his voice heavy, as if he had prepared for this moment a long time ago, yet dreaded it just the same. This was the conversation he had never wanted to have. Then the truth spilled out. David, her husband, the man she had trusted, the man she had loved, was Kaylee, the legendary assassin she and Jarvis had been hunting down for months. The reason she had never found him was because he had been sleeping right next to her all along. Avery felt the weight of every mission, every lead, every moment she had spent combing through evidence with Jarvis. All of it had been wasted effort because she had been chasing someone she thought she knew, someone she thought she could trust. David had kept his identity hidden, convinced that revealing it would only put her in danger. The irony of it all was suffocating. He admitted he could have wiped out Brezhnov and his men long before any of this had escalated, but doing so would have raised Avery's suspicions, would have forced him to tell her the truth before he was ready. Now, with no more lies left to tell, he asked for her forgiveness, promised he would fix everything, clean up the mess, as long as she could find it in herself to trust him one more time. But Avery had nothing left to say. Without a word, she turned away, leaving him behind as she went after Brezhnov. She didn't need more betrayal. She needed to end this. The moment she stepped into the hallway, her breath hitched in her throat. Jarvis lay there, lifeless, his body a cruel reminder of how far Brezhnov had taken things. The man she had considered family, the man who had guided her career, the man who had given her purpose, had gone. Her grief burned into rage, her anger fueling her every step as she stormed toward Brezhnov, barely holding herself back from tearing the entire facility down with her bare hands. Meanwhile, Brezhnov basked in his temporary victory, watching his bank account swell with ransom money from desperate governments. Then the power cut out. Brezhnov barely had time to curse before Avery and David attacked, launching into the fight they had been waiting for. With David's help, Avery tore through Brezhnov's army, eliminating them one by one. But Brezhnov wasn't dumb enough to go down without an escape plan. As the last of his forces fell, he grabbed his laptop, the one holding Canary Black, and bolted, his right-hand man at his side. Avery didn't hesitate. She chased them down, the pursuit ending in an abandoned bar, one of Brezhnov's hideouts. There she shot his right-hand man in the leg, knocking him out of the fight before turning her gun on Brezhnov. The two traded bullets, gunfire shaking the empty walls, but soon Brezhnev ran out of ammo. A sick grin stretched across his face as he tossed his weapon aside, challenging her to finish this in hand-to-hand combat. Avery didn't hesitate. As they fought, his injured henchman, still alive, still scheming, activated Canary Black, targeting every country that had refused to pay the ransom. Avery barely registered the threat, her mind locked on finishing Brezhnev before the virus went live. The countdown was ticking down, but she fought harder, faster, landing the final blow before he could watch his plan unfold. The second he hit the ground, she grabbed his laptop and deactivated Canary Black, ensuring it never reached the outside world. She had done it. The world was safe. Not long after, David appeared, his wounds barely slowing him down as he begged for forgiveness. He swore his love had been real, that he had never meant to lie, that he wanted her to understand why he had kept his secret. But Avery had heard enough lies to last her a lifetime. She refused to entertain his apology, refused to pretend like love could survive deception. Soon Evans and his team arrived, forcing David to disappear into the shadows. Avery stayed behind. Even though she knew she'd be arrested, she wasn't going to run. The next day, she sat across from Evans, who looked ready to make her pay for every stunt she had pulled. Even though he knew she was innocent, he wanted his own revenge, wanted her to suffer for humiliating him. But before he could lay a hand on her, the president's aide entered, dismissing him on the spot. She had a message for Avery, and it didn't involve punishment. The president was grateful. Avery had saved the world, and as a reward, she would receive a sizable bonus. Her name had been cleared, but her trust wasn't coming back anytime soon.